pivot points in Blender. So what is a pivot point? Right, so as soon as you select the object, you see this orange. Okay, I'm just going to move the cursor over here, right? And you see this orange dot over here. Okay, see this orange dot over here, that's called a pivot point. So every object that we do have in the scene has a different object pivot point. Like for example, I'm just going to press Shift D to duplicate this, press G, Y, and I'm going to move it over there, and you can see that this object has its own pivot point and this object has its own pivot point. So now I'm just going to duplicate this as well, press G, X, and move it over there. Right, so now we have three different objects in the scene. Let me just bring this one a bit closer. We have three different objects in a scene, in this specific scene. Okay, and we can then now you see the difference between them. Okay, so I'm just going to move this one as well. But before I move it, so if I rotate, for example, if I rotate this object, you see that now I've selected the object and it's moving. It's not moving on a specific axis, it's moving in a different axis, right? So I'm just going to undo that, and as soon as I select, you can see that it's moving around on the pivot point just like that. Okay, so this will be the same thing happening over there. So I'm just going to undo that, right? However, let me just move this over here quickly and move. We're just going to take the cursor and put it in the middle. So we're going to press Shift S and cursor to world origin, right? And we're putting it over there, right? So now what we can do is we can go over to the object, and then we can set, we can say selection to cursor, and there we go. So because of the pivot point, it moved directly to the cursor, right? So let's go to object and set origin. Okay, so we want to set the origin to the 3D cursor. So the 3D cursor is this option over here, or this icon over here, right? This one over here, this is called the cursor, 3D cursor. Alright, so we're just going to place it over there. However, let me just move it over there. However, the pivot point has now moved from the object itself to the center of the world. So if I do rotate it, rotate, R for rotate, and Z, and you can now see that it's rotating around the pivot point, which is in the center of the world, rather than rotating over here around the object itself, right? And this is because we are in object mode. However, that's the difference between there, right? So if we had to, for example, now delete this objects, right? And we wanted to duplicate the object, right? It's in the same space, and we can rotate it on the Z-axis, maybe around about there, and we can rotate it to another duplicate and rotate it again, and we can just do it like that. So this is based on the pivot point. So let's just delete that as well. All right, so moving the cursor again to the world origin, which is Shift S, right, and then over there. Okay, so now that the pivot point is over there, it's rotating around the pivot point. Okay, so another thing to look at as well is in edit mode, if we do rotate, you see that it's now rotating the object itself in edit mode rather than rotating around the pivot point itself. So for example, if we had to move this object around about here in the scene and go back to object mode, and we had to rotate it, you can now see that it's rotating the same way. But let's just say, for example, let's go back into edit mode. Let's just say, for example, we're moving it like this. Okay, something like that, and deselect it, and now we're over here. You can see that it is away from the floor grid. And remember, this is the floor grid. The floor grid is based on a idea of where the flow of your scene is. Okay, so now that the object is in the air and we rotate it, you can now see that it's rotating in the air rather than on the floor itself. Let's just undo that again, and there we go. So That's just something to keep in mind when dealing with pivot points.